right, all. I want to talk about something called pseudocode. Okay, so you might remember from the last module, I was kind of talking about the history of programming, right? And one of the first things, or one of the main things I was getting across with the history is that computers really only understand what's called machine code. And machine code is literally just ones and zeros, right? And so even when you write a program like P5 or JavaScript or anything like that, what actually happens is that you have to translate the code into machine code. That's the only way this works, right? So what actually used to happen before computer languages were developed was people would figure out what they wanted to do, and then they would like literally write it out and then figure out how to take those ideas and translate them into machine code. So if you wanted to add two numbers together, you would say, have number one, or number, I'm just going to call it like number A, have number B, output is, number A plus number B or something like that. Now, this is not actually code, but it's like literally kind of writing out what we want to do. And back in the day, they would be like, all right, well, how do we translate this into machine code? How do we translate this into machine code? How do we translate this into machine code? And they would like write, that was kind of the last step, is to like literally write it out, because it was the most tedious and time consuming part of it. We can kind of jump over that part now because we don't actually have to translate anything to machine code ourselves. That's what your JavaScript engine will do. It'll actually translate all of your JavaScript code into machine code. But the concept of pseudocode is still really helpful. Okay. So when I talk about pseudocode, pseudocode is a step-by-step description of your algorithm. Algorithm in this case just means like, what are you trying to do? Okay. Pseudocode isn't a computer language. You can't just type it out and put it into, JavaScript or anything and have it work. Basically, it's just simple, English or whatever language you're writing in, whatever written language you like to write in, that is intended for other humans to understand it, not to, than a machine. Okay. So why bother doing this? Well, the benefit of doing this before you do any major project is you can kind of break down your ideas in the logical step by step. Okay. So if I wanted to add two numbers together, first I have to have number one or number A, I have to have number B, and then I can then add the two together. You can't add two numbers together that don't exist, right? So that's kind of, when you write it out literally, as opposed to like trying to come up with a code in your head, it kind of helps to kind of, literally lay it out. It makes it easier to explain to other people, especially people who are non-programmers, because like if they look at a bunch of code and functions, like they don't really, they're not going to understand that, but they get the idea of take two numbers and add them together. Like that's something we can all understand, regardless of whether you understand a particular coding language or not. Um, it also makes it easier for potential issues. All right. So I don't know, for some reason, maybe there's no way within my computer to store two values. So if I have to store, if I can't store two values, then I can't add them together. There's no way to do that. Right. So that could be a problem if that was a caveat of me working on this particular project. Okay. It's not, I'm just saying, like, the point of this is so you can kind of look at it and be like, where might there be issues that we need to think about? Okay. So I'm just gonna give an example, and then kind of like I want you guys to kind of practice this in the discussions, and I'll talk about that in a second. So, problem: create a program that places a circle at a random X position on a canvas. Okay. So how would I solve this? Well, first I'm going to create a variable called that holds the X position. Okay. I'm just going to call it posX, or whatever you want to call it. Set posX equal to a random value with the dimensions of the canvas. The reason I added that last part is if you didn't do that, it might go off of the canvas. Use the circle function to build the circle and substitute the pos x value. I should have said substitute pos x variable into the x coordinate or something like that. So notice that none of this is actual code. If I were to copy and paste this into, the P5.js editor, it's not going to work. But it gets us thinking about like, what do I need to do? So first thing, like, all right, I need to translate this. How do I make a variable? Well, at least in JavaScript, you would say let pos x, that declares it, although it does not initialize it. Set it to a random value, so we can use the random function for that. The dimensions, either you can just literally put in the dimensions, or remember last module we talked about reserved variables. Like you can actually tell the size of the browser if you wanted to and set that to the dimensions. You guys know how to here. It's like we're kind of a little bit dependent on what functions we can take advantage of, but like, you may have to write your own function, things like that. But here it's like, okay, we're going to use the existing circle function we know about and then use that with this to solve this problem. Now, this is the problem. The problem is placing a circle at a random x value. It says nothing about color. It says nothing about y value. It says nothing about how big it is. Technically it doesn't say it has to be. I did say it has to be on the canvas. So in theory, it can't be off of the canvas. But if it didn't say that, this said place a random circle. It technically doesn't matter if it's on the canvas or not. So it's like really kind of evaluating what the problem is and then trying to come up with a step-by-step kind of solution, which you can then maybe turn into code somehow, right? So here's what I want you guys to do. In your discussions, I gave you 3 problems. You can choose one. You don't have to do all 3 of them, okay? And what I want you to do is choose them, and I want you to write out some sort of basic pseudo code, okay? This means you can write in complete sentences. You don't have to use any like, specific JavaScript things. You don't have to use like a particular function or anything. You just write it out. You can, instead of saying the random function, you can just say, program chooses random number. Okay. That doesn't involve any specific function or variable. It's just like, whatever. So for this is not like, I want you guys to participate, but it's not like homework. Okay. So what I mean is you're not really graded on whether or not you got the right answer, per se. That I don't really care about as much. I mean, obviously it's nice if you get the right answer, but I'm more interested that you guys kind of think about things, you practice. So here it's like you're really only getting kind of graded if you participate or not. If you write anything, you basically get credit. Obviously, I want you to not just put anything, but think about what you're putting. But don't worry if you feel like don't stress over whether you got quote unquote the right answer, but just whether or not you're completing what I'm asking you to do, which is really just like, did you try? Did you look at the problem and try to come up with a realistic, way to solve it, kind of thing? Okay. So I want you guys to do that just as practice. The idea is hopefully I'm not requiring that you do this, but I want you guys to think about how you can apply this towards the problem you guys are working on, which is your random, the digital popcorn, where you're placing random circles, right? And if you're going to add any, I'm not requiring that you add anything, but if you want to add things like random colors or I don't know, something else, how, think about putting that in the pseudo code and thinking about how you're going to solve that problem. Okay.